Critical feedback is invaluable for professional growth, but it must be handled correctly. If it feels like an attack, it can dampen any motivation for making positive changes. If the person giving the feedback is overly subjective or harbors negative opinions about you, the feedback can actually become destructive or at least counterproductive. You can't control how feedback is delivered to you, but you can control how you accept it and what you make of it. Even feedback that's negative and poorly delivered can be constructive and useful if you apply a few strategies for seeing the positive in negative feedback. The first of these strategies is to differentiate between destructive criticism and constructive negative feedback. They're very different creatures. Criticism is highly subjective, rarely productive, and tends to emphasize problems rather than solutions. It frames issues in a negative manner and highlights what's wrong instead of how to make things right. It focuses on past actions, the perceived weaknesses and failures. It cuts down instead of building up. Constructive negative feedback, on the other hand, focuses on finding solutions and improving performance. It frames issues in a positive manner, identifies a goal, and inspires the recipient to reach it. It addresses problems objectively and invites a conversation about how the problem can be avoided in the future. But even in the best light, it can still be difficult to receive constructive negative feedback. In that light, it's important to take the necessary time to evaluate and respond to the feedback rather than reacting to it. Thank the feedback giver for their input and ask for time to process their comments. Give yourself the space to take a breath and absorb the feedback. If the person giving the feedback wants to continue the conversation, politely decline and explain that you need time to collect your thoughts. If possible, remove yourself physically from the space by, say, taking a walk or at least stepping away. Here is where you can apply a further strategy: processing any negative emotions you're feeling. Even though negative feedback may be constructive and well-intentioned, it can still damage your confidence and stunt your motivation. You need to acknowledge these emotions as normal responses. Consider reaching out to a trusted peer or mentor. Talking to others about how you feel can go a long way toward processing any negative fallout from the feedback and gaining a more objective understanding. Then ask yourself what the feedback is really trying to tell you. Is it clear? Is it valid? Is it something you can work with? Can you turn it into actions that will help you improve? What's there that's concrete and suggests steps you can take to move forward? Regardless of the nature of the feedback you receive, how you respond to it determines how beneficial it will be. By separating destructive criticism from constructive feedback, and giving yourself the time and space to process your emotions, you can emerge from any feedback session with a renewed focus on your professional growth. The point of critical feedback is creating change. Receiving it is just the beginning of the process. The way you implement feedback is what unlocks your potential and furthers your professional development. Let's explore some strategies to properly turn feedback into actions for your development. The first strategy is to identify and overcome any challenges that could impede your implementation of feedback. These potential challenges won't always be obvious, but you can tease them out by asking some basic questions. What are you ultimately trying to achieve? And what are the obstacles that could derail your efforts? Perhaps you will need to learn a new skill. How will you do that? And what resources will you require? How will you acquire them? Once feedback has been shared, your manager's role is to support implementation. If you need skills training, for example, they should help you get it by providing time and resources. If you need stretch assignments, they should help set them up. By taking action to help you implement their feedback, that feedback then becomes useful and practical. In a similar vein, another strategy is to find a trusted colleague or mentor who can help you reflect on the feedback and how you can best implement it. It may not always be possible for you to analyze the feedback alone. This is especially true when the feedback is directed at behaviors or attitudes rather than processes. You can turn to someone you trust to help you look at the feedback objectively. Someone with whom you feel psychologically safe and who you trust to be honest and open can help you sort through the feedback and your emotional responses to it. Openly engaging with the feedback in this way lessens the chance you'll react impulsively or reject it. The support of a trusted colleague can help you identify steps you can take to move past any initial resentment or reluctance and decide what you're going to do to move forward. As you take steps to move forward, you can take on the next strategy. Identify tangible actions for making the changes necessary for your development. Part of this involves creating a developmental plan to guide you. This plan should summarize the feedback you received and focus on the main areas of needed improvement. It should culminate with the necessary steps you'll take to proceed. Those steps should reflect specific, quantifiable goals that allow you to monitor and measure your progress. Each step is a milestone on the way to your ultimate goal. Your plan should also include any resources or help you need and any outside training required to fill knowledge gaps. Clearly, implementing feedback isn't solely your responsibility. Both you and the person who provided the feedback are partners in its implementation. Therefore, a final strategy for implementing developmental change is to create a feedback loop with the person who provided the feedback to follow up on your plan and progress. Development is rarely linear. Your plan will change as you progress. Circumstances will change. You'll learn new skills and need to practice them. And your goals will evolve and need to be adjusted. Your feedback provider must be part of that change and evolution. Share the steps you plan to take to improve your performance. Ask for any help and guidance that you might need. Work together with your feedback provider to evaluate your progress against their expectations and take corrective action when it's required. Move forward and repeat as necessary. A feedback loop ensures that you get the maximum benefit from your developmental plan. By engaging with the feedback provider and seeking the support of your trusted colleagues, you put yourself in a position to implement feedback in a way that fosters your professional development. It turns feedback into action, and action into growth, and that's the point of feedback in the first place.